All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ship GTM podcast. First one after the break. Hopefully, everyone had a great new year. 2026 is already on us, which is crazy. And it's only been a few weeks since we last chatted, but I feel like so many things have changed. Opus 4.5 is like taking the world by storm.
Cloud Code. Yeah, it's all
Cloud
over.
Code. Yeah. A lot has happened. But the thing that we're going to talk about today is the emerging of new maybe non-traditional software engineering roles. GTM engineer is kind of one example. I'll list a few: design engineer, support engineer, growth engineer, product engineer, all these different things that kind of maybe under the hood, what you're doing is writing code or now like working with agent orchestration. But these roles didn't really exist years ago. I think years ago, if you told someone GTM engineer, they would probably, I don't know, 4 years ago, I probably would have thought you were talking about Google Tag Manager, honestly.
Yeah, I know.
Just something random. But yeah, so we want to dive into these and maybe talk about why they're showing up, why they're important, and maybe like the future of these domain-specific software engineering roles rather than just being focused on product or infrastructure.
Yeah, like I think we're at a point where, thanks to the abstraction of software even being completely skyrocketed with AI, it allows a lot more people to get into web development, into software engineering, and to make that their identity. And with that, I feel like it allows a lot of these like people who were in a role before, design, GTM, marketing, customer support, who then grind and learn how to do engineering, how to code, and now how to use AI to code. And it allows them to have this like multi-discipline background where they can then become these engineers that are popping up. And I think that's one perspective I've noticed. And I noticed that because that is me basically, and you is like, I started more in a design like background and got to the point where I learned engineering, right? And this is pre-AI. But because of the abstraction of Tailwind and of Next.js or whatever, it allowed it for me to easily hop in and learn kind of from top down, which I think is different than maybe a traditional like engineer who has a computer science background who learns more bottom up.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting because we both kind of did something similar, right? Where we got into engineering from different backgrounds, but it was pre-AI, which I think is kind of crazy to think about. Maybe it was like less common then. I think now like you'll see a lot of non-technical people start kind of fiddling with Claude Code, Cursor, V0, Replit, some of these other tools to like get them into writing code, which is really cool. It's like the bar is a lot lower. Like I feel like we had to really kind of claw our way and do kind of a mix of top down, bottoms up with learning. But now it's a lot easier to learn, which is kind of, it's really cool. I totally agree. I think another reason too is like if you have an engineer that is interested, kind of like coming from the other side, right? Like if you have an engineer that's maybe classically trained, for lack of a better term, as a software engineer, and then they want to get into some of these other disciplines, or they've been adjacent to these their whole career, it's a lot easier for these roles to pop up now, I feel like, because the cost of writing code has decreased. Obviously, like the most expensive part is still like human capital, like hiring an engineer to work on these things, but like their throughput has just increased like crazy, and being able to work on more things at once, ship more code faster, it allows other teams that maybe didn't have capacity for engineering to like suddenly have capacity for engineering, right? Like I feel like procurement was the way that they kind of filled the place of engineering talent in some of these teams. Like you saw this in like go to market all the time, right? Like CRMs like really aren't complex software, and oftentimes they like have really specific needs to an org, but like, you know, you buy Salesforce because you don't want to have to hire engineers to like maintain a solution. Or same thing with like support engineering. Like right, there's kind of like other platforms that you can use to kind of like lessen that curve with. I mean, honestly, design engineering probably pretty similar, but now it's just way easier to have engineers, and the cost has gone down with the ability to write more code, which I think is pretty awesome. And so I think that's maybe one theory why these roles are starting to kind of pop up all the time.
Yeah, and I think going off of that, like from the inverse of when people are just learning how to code. I think it's, yeah, like what you're saying is from the company standpoint as well, they have problems, right? It's just business problems and they want to solve them. And oftentimes coding is the best way to, like, engineering is the best way to solve things, right? It's like, yeah, Salesforce does everything, but often, like, it's best if you can hard code some sort of script that's unique to you, and like that's what you do at Vercel all the time. And it, as you know, as you learn engineering and become a software developer, quote unquote, it's like you can then solve problems so much more like specific to you, and you can like scale them so much easier with, if you know how to engineer and how to code. And so I think as it's merged in these like modern companies, and I do think we are referencing more the like Silicon Valley style tech
Yeah.
company who is like more engineer first as a company, right? Because that allows, they need an engineer who can also design, because they can't hire both at the beginning. But I feel like it has extended out where we are getting to bigger and bigger companies, even like us Vercel size or bigger, where it is they are looking for people who can do like kind of these multifaceted things and apply their engineering mind and skills to a like non-traditional engineering field, right? Because that has proven its value.
Yeah, totally. No, I think that's a really good point. I think that startups are like a breeding ground for generalists, and so I think that
Yeah.
it's cool that like a lot of these roles kind of emerge from that. Um, and then now with AI, right? Like anyone can be a generalist; they can
Yeah.
do lots of things at once. I think you brought up a good point too. Like some of these maybe fields or disciplines that don't have as much like technical under like people that have technical understanding that work in them. I think that like what's happened over time is that a lot of these fields have gotten more complex. Like
Mm-hmm.
marketing, for instance, I feel like marketing, 30 years ago was much different than marketing now, right? Like digital marketing is pretty complex. Like there's a lot of tech behind marketing now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just like it's more of like an engine than ever. Whereas before it was maybe just like copywriting, messaging, and it's still all about those things, but it's like way more complex now, right? Like retargeting, data, having clean data, knowing who your customer is, etc. And so taking something that is technical and then trying to like create some sort of engine around it, like a go-to-market engine, it's like you're gonna have to use an engineer, right? Like it's an engine. It's if you have an engine, you're gonna need an engineer.
Yeah.
So I think that that's like a one reason too that we see more of these roles coming up is because things are just complex. And then I guess another point too, and this is maybe like more of a hot take, but I think that a lot of these solutions that existed in these non-technical roles like marketing, revenue operations, sales ops, customer support, you know, design, whatever. There were a lot of solutions built with like no code platforms or different
Yeah.
automations. Like Zapier is definitely like a generational business, and they've done like an amazing job of building a product to let people automate things. Same with like Tray.io, and N8N is one of them too. But those like grow in complexity, and like N8N is open source, but these others aren't, right? So that's like you have this closed source thing that's like you're running your business on, and you don't really understand what's going on under the hood. And for someone to like go in and then inherit that and change it or tweak it or update it, it's like they then have to like it's so difficult to understand, right? You're just looking at this like mess that someone else created, just like classic tech debt.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's not living as code or something that's like more modular, then it's just going to create more tech debt, right? But I think like in the age of AI, if you have like code as your source of truth, then it's like a lot easier to grok. And anyone can actually just like point an LLM to a code base and ask it what's going on. You don't have to be technical. And so I think that that's like another reason. I think that if done right and you have engineers building these systems, then I think that it can help prevent a lot of the tech debt that any work experiences, whether it's technical or non-technical in practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that brings up to like an interesting point about like the trade-offs, which is like, I think the reason it's worked well for small to like mid-sized tech companies is because there are so many like engineers to non-engineers at the company. And so
Yeah, good point.
I feel like more people understand that, whereas like at maybe a more traditional company, this is less prevalent because it is there's like more like teams that have their own discipline, right? Like the larger company you work at, the more there is red tape, the more there is checking things off and doing it that way. And so this works, I feel like, perfectly for companies that are fast, iterative, because that's how code is. It's like it is easy. It takes time to, just in like a design engineering example, it takes time to do a UX research, which gets passed to a UX designer, which then gets passed to a UI designer, which then gets passed to a front end engineer. And then there's a lot that gets lost in translation. Whereas if somebody can, if like, let's say we have the UX researcher who's passing to a design engineer, that just becomes a lot less convoluted. And then you're able to quickly iterate and produce a final product faster than if you have that larger team, which
Yeah.
obviously at a larger company, like those teams are defined for a reason. And it will be interesting, I think, to see how like tools like Claude Code, or once code continues to become less and less a factor, how that will be integrated into the system.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think that obviously I'm going to, shill the need for engineers because you and I are both engineers. But I think that the nice thing about working with engineers is there's like a bias to action and a bias to like solution. Maybe that's a bad thing sometimes, but I feel like as long as there's like it's outcome focused, then yeah, I totally agree, right? Like the purpose is to just like ship something that improves an outcome or leads to some certain outcome, and then there's like a way faster iteration cycle if you're just building it and shipping something. It's very like it's an easy feedback loop rather than like people in the loop, right? To just build something and then see if it works.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think this works especially well for people who maybe consider themselves more generalists, who either one, yeah, like started in a different career and then moved into engineering, or two, they enjoy learning and applying new things, and maybe they've had that opportunity through staying at a smaller company throughout instead of going to a larger company and getting more siloed into one space. And so I just do think it is interesting to like consider like what are the trade-offs, with becoming a generalist engineer, maybe like we can even call it as like the overarching concept of this,
Yeah.
versus like directly going into a company. And I understand too, it's like a lot of people don't have the choice, it's like I need a job, so I'm going to go here.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I think I think that's a great question. I think there's like probably so many ways we can talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
so many different kind of things to dive into. I think like my first thought is that with working as like a kind of domain specific engineering role, like you're super close to impact
Yeah.
because and it's very outcome based. I think that like at a larger company, you might be um, evaluated based off of like what you ship, like or
Mm-hmm.
maybe like the volume that you ship. Maybe like if you're on a team at a large company, for instance, and you're working on like one specific feature, and your team has a PM, you've got engineers, you've got test engineers, you've got a UI designer, whatever. You're probably evaluated on like that specific feature, like how much you're shipping, et cetera, whatever. I think that like if you're like a go-to-market engineer or like a product engineer, you're going to be evaluated on like, the bottom line impact to the business. And so I think that there's like a higher pressure, higher reward as well.
Yeah.
But then like you said, I think those are like harder roles to come by. I think they're becoming more common at larger companies. I think that like series B to series, E, F, whatever, et cetera. Now, Databricks has like series Z or whatever, but like
Yeah.
basically like still series B and beyond startups, I think that they kind of understand this pretty well, that you kind of need this role, but then these bigger companies might not understand it. So I think that, and I'm curious maybe what you think too, but I would assume that like having something like that on your resume and trying to explain it to a large corporation, it might be a little bit harder career wise if that's like the way that you want to go. But if you're just like really focused, providing value, and you have some sort of incentive to like grow a business, whether that's like equity in the business or some sort of rev share, however you're compensated as an engineer, then I think it's like, yeah, it's an amazing path for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like that's all great points. And like I think in my experience, since I have followed this path, right, it is like what's worked really well for me is transparency, I would say, and like what I build and open sourcing a lot of things. And we've talked about this before on the podcast, but it is difficult being a generalist because sometimes, and I think especially in just like the modern hiring practice, it's easy to get pigeonholed because it's easy to define a job as like a front end engineer and we're looking for 5 years of React. And, that's just easy for someone who's hiring, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in reality, we all have different skills and talents and we have different backgrounds. And for especially generalists, you don't maybe have a specific path that's obvious or easy to explain to somebody. So being transparent has allowed me to, one, like broaden my impact and share what I've been working on and make things people use, just being like open sourcing things and talking about my systems and talking about the things I do on social media, because then it allows people to get kind of like a fuller picture of you. And then I think it does like, yeah, it is like a trade-off, right? And I was looking through the free game website from Virgil Abloh, who is a generalist designer, honestly, did many things across graphic design until like art, fashion, Louis Vuitton, everything. And so I was looking through that, and there's a video interview that he says he's learned millions of things from, right? Virgil did. And it's with Peter Seville, who is almost, he's a similar person to Virgil, where he was a designer who moved into album cover design, who moved into fashion, who moved into art more traditionally. And he talks about how being a generalist, it's not for everyone because it's just a unique path, because in some spaces it's hard to be welcomed if you are a generalist, right? Like I think I have a hard time sometimes like talking to maybe a traditional software engineer writing, C, right? Because yeah, I'm claiming I am a software engineer and building software, but it is very different than what they're doing and the knowledge they have. And so at times it is like difficult, I think, to kind of like break into that type of thing, or like you kind of mesh between like different worlds. And so you can feel like an outsider, I think, a lot. And I think that is something like to think about. But I think as it becomes easier to build and to produce things, if you are sharing and being open and just trying, like honing in your skills and talents, like you will become noticed. And it's almost good to find a place where you can refine those skills, like find a job where you can do that and become maybe, yeah, like you start getting really directly into like GTM plus engineering. Like then that is a very much more defined job that you can, you know, easily get yourself into, and then hopefully that grows, right? I guess is the hope of us,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a pretty good place to kind of wrap this up too. I think that like you made a good point. There's obviously trade-offs. I think like as a generalist, you'll always have the problem of explaining to people what you do because
Yeah.
you know you could tell one person, oh, I do software engineering. You could tell another person, oh, I do like go to market motions. Tell another person, I do customer
Yeah.
support. Another person, I'm a
AI
designer.
engineering, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
AI engineering, whatever. But I think that's the biggest thing is like if you really want to provide impact, then you just need to kind of find the spot that's like best for you, where you can provide the most impact you can. And if you're a generalist, great, right? You should probably, you know, don't shy away from these kind of emerging non-traditional software engineering roles. But there's also a great path, right, to be just a traditional software engineer at some of these companies in a more traditional scope.
Yeah. And I think like, yeah, if you spend time on Twitter, like you may think that that's terrifying and that's not going to work out. But like in reality, there is, for every San Francisco company, there's 1,000 insurance real estate companies, that still need
Yeah.
an engineer to manage everything. And they're going to not treat it the same as like what we're talking about. And so I think it is like down to the person and like what you enjoy. And if you've had a hard time maybe fitting into a certain place, then maybe you are a generalist, and I
Mm-hmm.
think like human history, there's been plenty of generalists. Like I think maybe it's maybe newer in the engineering space because it was easy to engineering became kind of like a culture of it's one type of person, like a doctor or whatever. But now it is becoming more just like a tool that a generalist can use anywhere, right? And so
Yeah,
there's a lot of opportunity.
definitely. Yeah, and I think we'll see this trend kind of keep going. My bet is that it continues, and I think that it'll eventually make its way out of Silicon Valley into these other companies because everyone's going to be able to eventually reap the benefits of automating these processes with AI and engineering. So
Yeah,
time will tell,
exactly.
but it'll be good. Well, thanks everyone. Till next time, we'll see you around.